She thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. What she didn't know was that I was always one step ahead, waiting for the perfect moment to make her pay. How could she do this to me? How could she do this to our family? Those were the first thoughts that ran through my mind when I woke up the next morning, my head pounding from the alcohol I had drowned myself in the night before. My name is Jonathan Fremont, and up until last night I believed my wife Susan was my partner, my true love. Turns out she was still a loving wife, just not to me. She sat across from me last night and admitted she had been cheating for over a year. And if that wasn't enough, she expected me to accept it. Just like that. As if our years together, our family, our life meant nothing. Yeah, not happening. I fought to keep my anger in check, forcing myself to go over every word she had said. She claimed she loved him, but also loved me. That was supposed to make it better? She then dropped the real bombshell. She planned to spend more nights with him and I had no say in it. He was a divorce lawyer, she said. Just a friend she had been helping. And if I didn't play nice about the situation, well then he'd be her divorce lawyer. That made me laugh, though it was short-lived. I may not be an expert in the law, but I've seen enough courtroom dramas to know that representing your mistress in a divorce against her husband is a serious conflict of interest. He could lose his license for that. The thought gave me a brief sense of satisfaction. But then reality hit again and I was back to feeling like I'd been sucker punched. I still didn't even know who this guy was. Some smug, suit-wearing snake who thought he could waltz in and take what I built? I had seen stories like this before. One guy I knew had been through it. His wife drained their accounts, left him with nothing, and then lawyered up, thinking she could take him for everything. But he was smart. He moved his money, got himself a solid attorney, and in the end she lost big. Sure, she still got half. It was a no-fault state after all, but no alimony. The difference between him and me? He didn't have kids. I do. And that changes everything. At the very least, I knew I'd have to pay child support whether I liked it or not. I caught my reflection in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back at me. Had I really let myself go this much? My hair was thinning, my face looked older, and don't even get me started on the gut. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling a fleeting moment of smugness that I still had more than Detective Stabler on S-View. But the beer belly? That had to go. The worst part was, as much as Susan said it just to cut me down last night, she wasn't wrong. I had let myself go. 60-hour workweeks, endless overtime, doing everything I could to keep my family comfortable. My kids deserved it. My cheating wife? Not so much anymore. I still loved my kids. That would never change. But Susan? That love died the moment she told me she expected me to accept her betrayal. I wasn't nearly as powerless as Susan wanted me to believe. First things first, I made some calls and canceled everything I could. No more shared credit cards, no more joint accounts. If she wanted to run off with her lawyer boyfriend, she wasn't going to do it on my dime. Engines had always been my thing, even when I was just fixing cars in my backyard as a shade tree mechanic. Now that I was a certified diesel mechanic, I was making solid money with plenty of overtime at time and a half. But all the hours I'd been putting in for our future? That was done. I threw on some sweats and went for a jog, not just to clear my head, but also to start dealing with this beer gut Susan had oh so helpfully pointed out last night. Let her sneer at me all she wanted. I'd fix that soon enough. After my run, I called my boss and told him I needed to take a couple of weeks off. Family emergency, I said. He didn't ask for details, just told me to take the time I needed. That was one thing I appreciated about the guy, he knew when to push and when to back off. Then it was time to gear up. I went through my closet and took stock of what I had. My work boots were just about shot, so I made a mental note to get a new pair. Nothing flashy, just a good replacement. After that, I found a sporting goods store and picked up an aluminum baseball bat, a large gym bag and, on a whim, a sports girdle. I didn't want my gut giving me away. If Susan's lover ever got a look at me, I didn't want him IDing me by something as stupid as my stomach. I paid cash for everything. No credit card trails, no way for anyone to track what I was up to. That was the easy part. Now came the real challenge, playing the heartbroken, desperate husband. I waited a bit before calling Susan, letting my voice shake just enough to sound frantic. When she finally picked up and saw my pale face, her expression shifted to worry. "What's going on, honey? Where are the kids?" she asked, eyes wide with fear. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "What do you care?" I snapped. "You were too busy with your boyfriend to worry that your children could have been hurt, or worse." My voice dripped with venom, my glare cold and full of hatred. Her face fell, guilt flashing across her features before she caught herself. "The kids are fine," I continued, my tone deadly calm now. "But you? You were unreachable for 2 hours after I got home from work. 2 hours, Susan. She opened her mouth to argue, to deny it, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes. She knew I was right. And no matter how stubborn or prideful she was, no matter how much she wanted to pretend she had control over this situation, she couldn't admit the truth. And I wasn't done making her squirm yet. I had been right about something. Susan barely glanced at me as she sneered, "Well, since the kids are fine, I'm going back after I shower." Then she threw one last dagger before walking away. "Just remember, if you try to divorce me, I'll leave you ruined and broken." I watched her disappear toward our bedroom, her words cutting deep. But as much as they stung, they also fueled something inside me. Anger. Resolve. A cold, steady fire burning in my gut. "There is a God," I thought as I turned on my heel, moving fast. I grabbed the GPS tracker and one of my voice-activated recorders before heading out. By the time I came back inside, towel drying my hair to sell the act, Susan was standing in the kitchen. She gave me a weak, almost pitying smile. "I'm sorry, honey," she murmured. I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Susan. If you were sorry, you wouldn't be going. You would still be a faithful wife instead of sneaking off to sleep with a man who isn't your husband." Her face tensed, but she held her ground. "You have to understand, I have to do this. He needs me," she said, her voice almost pleading. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. "Your family needs you, Susan." I let the weight of my words settle in. "Or do you not care about me and our children anymore? The 3 children we made together? They're the best of both of us, Susan. We built this family, you and me." For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt? Guilt? It didn't matter. She turned away, grabbing her purse, and walked out the door. I didn't stop her. Instead, I waited. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my gym bag. I checked the contents: flashlight, knife, and an aluminum bat. I tossed them inside, zipping it up tight. Then I switched on the GPS tracker I had planted earlier. She was only a few miles away. I gave her a 5-minute head start, then climbed into my truck and fired up the engine. The GPS led me straight to his house. When I pulled up, I saw her car already parked inside his garage. She even has a garage door opener for his place. Jesus. She might as well be married to him instead of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white with rage. But I took deep breaths, forcing myself to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't help me now. I scanned the house, checking for alarm systems. None that I could see. Good. I stayed low and moved toward the nearest window, careful to keep to the shadows. The darkness worked in my favor. Inside, the lights were on, making it easy to see without being seen. I crouched beneath the window, then slowly peeked over the sill. What I saw made my blood boil. There he was, sitting on the couch, stroking himself while my wife, gave him a little striptease. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. My fists tightened at my sides. And at that moment, I was damn glad I hadn't brought the bat with me. If I had followed my first instinct, I would have smashed through that window and beaten the man senseless. The rage inside me was boiling over, screaming for me to act, to make sure he never did this to anyone else's wife again. But I didn't. Not yet. I forced myself to back away, to retreat while I still had control. Once I was back in my truck, I stripped off the dark sweater, black jeans, ski mask, and Oakleys. Underneath, the sports girdle kept my gut in check, making me look leaner than I had in years. But for now, I needed to look normal. I swapped everything out for my usual blue jeans, a t-shirt, and my boots. Then I got the hell out of there. Jim. I had a first name now. By morning, I'd have his last name. Then I'd know everything there was to know about the man who had stolen my wife. When I got home, I moved straight to my nightstand and grabbed my lockpicks. They'd been sitting there untouched for years, a skill I had nearly forgotten. One I had learned back when my wife got locked out of her car and we couldn't afford a locksmith. Now they had a different purpose. I did some digging online, just enough to confirm what I'd already suspected. Jim had lost his wife in an accident a few years back. So that part wasn't a lie. But instead of moving on with his life like a decent man, he had used that tragedy to play the grieving widower, to gain sympathy, and to seduce my wife. Typical. The news of his loss didn't make me feel pity, it made me feel justified. This man had already suffered, yes, but not like this. Not the pain of betrayal. Not the pain of having your world ripped out from under you. He was about to learn what it really meant to pay for his sins. The next morning, I went to work like it was any other day. I kept up appearances, played my part. Susan had no idea I had followed her last night, and I wasn't about to let her suspect a thing. At lunch, I called her, keeping my voice light. "Hey babe, how are the kids?" "They're doing great," she replied casually. Sounds good. I'll have Mom pick them up shortly, I lied. Then I pushed the knife in just a little deeper. Can I expect some of your loving when I get home tonight? I asked, making sure to sound hopeful. A long silence. Too long. Then I heard the click. She had muted herself. I imagined her sitting there, weighing her response, deciding whether she even wanted to fake affection for me. Finally she spoke again, her voice measured, emotionless. I guess so. It's only fair. After all, I told you that I was all yours tonight. I clenched my jaw. Even without seeing her, I could tell she wasn't interested. She didn't want to. But soon she wouldn't have a choice. I forced a chuckle, keeping my tone light, pretending I hadn't caught the hesitation. I played along, acting like the doting husband, letting her think she still had control. The truth was she didn't. Not anymore. And when tonight came, she was going to realize just how much things had changed. Her laughter rang through the phone, light and casual, as if she hadn't just spat in the face of our marriage. I always shower and clean up after I've been with him, Susan said, her voice dripping with false reassurance. I wouldn't disrespect you by making you have sloppy seconds. She was lying. I knew she was lying. I forced myself to laugh with her. Well, I'm going down on you tonight, baby, I said smoothly. I want you to taste fresh for me. She giggled again. Don't worry, honey, I will, she assured me. I'll see you later. But I had no intention of going home. I wanted to be sure. I wanted proof. I waited, watching from down the street as her car pulled into our driveway exactly 10 minutes later. Then, without hesitation, I drove right past our house and straight back to his. I parked in the alley behind his neighborhood, slipping in through his back gate just as I had the night before. Only this time I wasn't empty-handed. This time I brought the bat. The ski mask was snug over my face, the Oakley shades in place. No witnesses. No evidence. Just me, him, and the consequences of his choices. I crept up to his bedroom window, peering inside. There he was, lover boy, snoring peacefully, completely unaware of the storm that was about to crash down on him. I smiled grimly. He had no idea. Nathan, one of my close friends, had once warned me, if you ever find out who he is, don't do anything crazy. Unfortunately for Jim, I had my own definition of justice. With one brutal swing, I brought the bat down between his legs, shattering his pelvis with a sickening crack. His body jerked awake, a scream of agony ripping through his throat as he doubled over in pain. Please, he sobbed. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I have money. I can pay you. I leaned in close, my voice low and ice cold. I don't want your money, I growled. I want you to never so much as think about Susan Fremont again. If you do, I let the weight of my words hang in the air. He whimpered, nodding frantically, tears streaming down his face. Good. I left him there, writhing in pain, and disappeared into the night. Once I was far enough away, I tossed the ski mask, gloves, and Oakleys into the fire pit behind an old abandoned warehouse. Ashamed to burn those shades, they were expensive, but it was a necessary loss. Every dollar spent was worth it. By morning, I was sitting across from my own divorce attorney. I wasn't just filing for divorce, I was suing Susan. Full custody of the kids. 75% of everything. No alimony. No child support, as long as she played along and signed the papers without a fight. And if she didn't? Well, then I'd be paying a little visit to her parents, and letting them know exactly why their daughter's marriage was over. I sat in my truck for a moment, gripping the recorder in my pocket. My attorney had made one thing clear, proof was everything. And now I had it. I approve of your affair now and forever, I said clearly into the recorder. Then I switched it off and tucked it away. I pulled into the garage, making sure to remove the GPS tracker and the voice-activated recorders I had planted in Susan's car. No more need for those. I tossed them into my truck, shutting the door on that part of the plan. Now it was time for the final act. I stepped inside the house, reactivating my pocket recorder before making my way to the kitchen. The smell of sizzling steak filled the air. Susan stood at the stove, flipping them over in the pan, looking, for all the world, like a devoted wife cooking dinner for her loving husband. I slid my arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to the side of her neck. That smells good, baby, I murmured. She leaned back into me slightly, her body relaxed as if everything was perfectly normal. As if our marriage wasn't a hollow shell. Over dinner we talked, or rather, I talked and she played along. I guided the conversation exactly where I needed it to go. So, I said casually, cutting into my steak. If I asked you, really asked you, to stop seeing him, would you? She sighed, her tone soft but filled with that same quiet condescension. I'm sorry, honey. I have to see this through. I clenched my jaw but kept my expression controlled, lowering my voice to sound exhausted, defeated. There's nothing I can do? I asked. She shook her head, her voice light, almost cheerful. Don't worry though, I'll still make time for you and the kids whenever I can. Wow, what a great mother. I barely held back the disgust rising in my throat. Then she added like it was nothing, but Tuesday night I have to meet him again. I'll be with him until Wednesday morning, and then I'll come home to take care of our kids. That was it. That was all I needed. The night played out like any other. She laughed, she flirted, she was so sure she had me exactly where she wanted me. I played my part, played the devoted husband who just wanted to make his wife happy. And when we ended up in bed together, I made sure she felt every bit of it. She loved every second. Every second. It wasn't until afterward, when she slipped into the bathroom, that the scream echoed through the house. I smiled to myself. Moments later, she stormed back into the bedroom, her face twisted in anger, her voice shrill. How can I possibly see him now? He doesn't want me marked, she shouted, eyes blazing. I leaned back against the pillows, utterly calm. Well, you're my wife, I said simply. And I want you marked as mine. If he doesn't like it, that's his problem. She gaped at me, furious, but she couldn't argue. She never told me not to. And judging by how much she enjoyed it in the moment, she couldn't exactly claim she didn't want it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. I deserved a Golden Globe, maybe even an Oscar, for putting up with her performance. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, shaking her head. But then, as if to reassure herself, she sighed dramatically and said, "Oh honey, I'm still your wife." I just smiled. For now. I love you so much, Susan murmured, snuggling closer to me. Just a few more months and this will have run its course. Then I'll be all yours again. She smiled at me, and this time it wasn't condescending. She actually believed what she was saying. Before, she had been prepared for the possibility that I might divorce her, ready to counter every move I made. But now she was going to be blindsided. Good. The next day, Susan was suddenly the perfect wife again. She cooked, she cleaned, she doted on me and the kids. That night, she even initiated sex, something she hadn't done in months. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger again. She had no idea what was coming. By the time she woke up the following morning, the divorce papers had already been filed. I let her go about her day, blissfully unaware, while I took the kids out for lunch at Burger King. My phone rang as I was driving home, Susan's voice screeching through the speaker. "Jonathan, what is the meaning of this?" I smirked. Oh, she must have just been served. "Oh, did I forget to mention that?" I said casually. "You must have gotten the papers." She sputtered, barely able to get the words out. "We'll talk about it when I get home, okay?" I added, my voice calm, almost bored. Then, before she could scream at me again, I ended the call and powered off my phone. I pulled into the garage, took the kids inside, and let them hang all over me like they always did. They loved their dad. And I loved them. Susan was waiting for me, standing stiffly in the living room, holding the divorce papers in her shaking hands. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. I crossed my arms, meeting her furious glare with a steady gaze. "That, Susan, is proof that you are an unfit mother, thanks to your affair with, well, whoever he is." She paled. "You can't." "Oh, and if he's acting as your attorney?" I added smoothly. "My lawyer tells me that's a severe breach of ethics. Sleeping with a client, especially in a divorce case? That's the kind of thing that gets lawyers disbarred." Susan's mouth fell open. She scrambled for words, her face draining of color. But I thought you were okay with it now," she cried, her voice tinged with genuine disbelief. I almost laughed. She actually believed that. "Susan," I sighed, shaking my head. "I realize now that I never really knew you." I let those words settle in. "I also realize now that you won't be taking the kids anywhere unless it's under my supervision, Mom's or Grandpa's." She opened her mouth to argue, but I was already walking away, heading toward the next step I had to take. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother. "Hey Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just wanted to let you know, I've filed for divorce from Susan. I'm going to be moving out soon." I heard her sharp inhale, followed by a pause. Then finally she exhaled and said, "Good." I explained everything to my mother, the affair, the betrayal, everything. I even told her how I had recorded Susan's admission, where she outright stated that her lover came before her husband and children. Mom's reaction was exactly what I expected. She was furious. Not just for me but for the kids. How could a mother do that to her own children? She didn't hesitate to offer her help, agreeing to watch the kids while I was at work. That was one less problem to worry about. I packed up the kids, making sure they were comfortable before turning my attention back to Susan. That's when she hit me with something I did not see coming. You didn't kill him, did you?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of suspicion and fear. I blinked at her, exasperated. "Kill who?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Jim?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "Jim who?" "The only Jim I know is Jim Barnes, and he's standing right next to me." That was true. Jim Barnes, one of my work buddies, the guy I drank with after long shifts, was right there, doing his best not to burst into laughter at what he was hearing. Jim already knew everything. I had filled him in on the lawyer lover boy and, more importantly, what I had done to him. When I told him the details, Jim had just grinned way too widely and nodded in approval. Now, as he listened to my side of the conversation, he was struggling to keep a straight face. Susan, on the other hand, was still trying to process it all. "This is the same guy I warned you about before," I reminded her. "The one who played the grieving widower to make himself look sympathetic? He used that to manipulate you, Susan." "No, he didn't," she said automatically, then stopped. She hesitated, her mind racing, piecing everything together. I could almost see the realization settle in. She thought about all the times he had guilt-tripped her, the way he had always played the victim, how he always made it seem like he needed her to save him. Then it hit her. "Oh my God, you're right," she shrieked. The moment was so rare, so completely unheard of, that I had to make sure it was acknowledged. "Susan," I said, smirking. "Mark this day on the calendar. The day you actually admitted that I was right about something." For once, she had nothing to say. In the end, everything unraveled quickly. Susan had majored in accounting, so she found a job without much issue. We sold the house and split the proceeds 50-50, but the joint accounts, the ones I had moved at the very start of all this, were split 75-25 in my favor. She tried to argue. The judge shut her down instantly. "Mrs. Fremont," the judge said sharply, fixing her with a look of pure disappointment. "Do I need to remind you that you very nearly lost all custody of your children due to your own selfishness? Now, get a job." She had no choice but to shut up and accept it. And that wasn't even the best part. The same judge handled my alienation of affection lawsuit against her precious James Robert Stevens. He tried to deny it. Tried to claim that their relationship was purely professional. And then, when cornered, tried to insist that they were just close friends. Until the judge leaned forward, expression unimpressed, and said, "Close? You were more than just attorney and client, Mr. Stevens. We both know that. Game. Set. Match." After everything that had happened, life finally started to feel normal again. Maybe even better than before. One night, I was at the bar with Angie, a close friend who had been a rock for me throughout the whole mess. We clinked our beer bottles together, taking a swig as she leaned back against the counter. "So, what's next for you, Jonathan?" she asked. I shrugged. "Getting back to work, raising my kids the best I can." That was the truth. I had already found a new place, a smaller, one-story house with 4 bedrooms. It was way cheaper than the massive house Susan had insisted we buy 3 years ago. The moment the divorce was final, I closed on it and moved in with the kids. "You all settled in yet?" Angie asked. "Yeah," I nodded. "Been a couple of weeks now." What I didn't say, what I didn't have to say, was that Angie had started coming around a lot more. And before I even realized what was happening, she had moved in with us. The kids loved her. She doted on them, making them laugh, helping with their homework, actually being present in a way Susan never was. And even though Susan was still their biological mother, they had started calling Angie Mommy too. Angie and I found it adorable. Susan? Not so much. She still came over for dinner some nights, usually when she was taking the kids for the weekend. Things between us had settled into something civil, almost businesslike. But that was fine. She made her choices and I had made mine. And at the end of the night, when the house was quiet and the kids were in bed, Angie and I would fall into each other's arms, making love until we were both breathless. Life was good. Really good. As for him, the man who thought he could take everything from me, he never recovered. After what I did to him, he was left penniless and alone. Every last cent of his late wife's insurance payout had been drained to cover his medical bills. No more expensive suits, no more charming his way through life. He had lost everything. His money, his reputation, even his ability to walk properly. Karma had done its job. And me? After all the pain, after all the betrayal, I had something better. A home. A woman who actually loved me. And a life that was finally mine again. Saturday morning, I woke up to the warm, inviting aroma of fresh coffee drifting through the house. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, casting golden streaks across the walls. I stretched, rolling over as a familiar thought crossed my mind. Today is our anniversary. 5 years. Kate and I had been married for 5 years. I had already planned something special. A few days ago I had picked out a gift for her, something I knew she'd love. It all started a couple of months ago when I noticed her flipping through some ads for kitchen appliances. She had lingered on the page for a multi-purpose food processor, her fingers tracing the image thoughtfully. Kate didn't have a lot of fancy kitchen gadgets, but I knew how much she could use something like that in her business. So I bought it. I had hidden it in the garage waiting for today. Quietly, careful not to wake her, I slipped out of bed and retrieved the wrapped gift. I set it on the kitchen table, adding a neatly tied bow and a card with a heartfelt note inside. Kate had always been independent, assertive, full of life. And today I was going to remind her just how much I adored her for it. I had imagined spending our anniversary in a quiet, intimate way, just the two of us, rekindling the romance we had in the early years of our relationship. Back then, we were adventurous, trying all kinds of role-playing games, constantly finding ways to keep the spark alive. But Kate had other plans. She wanted a gathering. A dinner party with friends. Her sudden change of heart surprised me, maybe even embarrassed me a little. But I didn't want to dampen her excitement, so I agreed. "How many people did you invite?" I asked, settling onto a stool and leaning against the table. "Not many," she said with a smile. "Mostly our close friends." That was better than a house full of strangers, at least. Kate threw herself into preparing for the evening, and before I knew it, hours had flown by. I even found myself helping out in the kitchen more than usual. She let me sample sauces, asked for my opinion on seasonings, and even handed me a knife to chop onions for her. "You're a great helper today," she teased, nudging me playfully. Felt good, normal, happy. By the time the first guests arrived, the table was set, the wine was breathing, and the house smelled incredible. "Oh, I think they're here," Kate said, peeking out the window excitedly. The night went smoothly at first. Friends laughed, clinked glasses, and shared stories over the meal. Somewhere along the way, Kevin, a friend of mine, pulled me aside. "You got a second?" he asked. "Sure," I said. We stepped into the hallway and he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Listen, I didn't know whether to bring this up, but Kate's been acting different lately. A little distant. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but man, I just wanted to check in with you." I frowned, not sure what to make of his words. "Different how?" He shook his head. "I don't know, just off. Maybe it's nothing, but I figured you'd want to know." I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded. A part of me wanted to brush it off, but another part, the part that had seen too many signs before, told me not to ignore it. Later that night, after everyone had left, I went to plug in my phone, realizing it was nearly dead. I rummaged through the desk drawer in the hallway but couldn't find my charger. Then I remembered. I left it in the bedroom last time I used it. I walked into the room, grabbing the charger from the nightstand. That's when I noticed Kate's laptop sitting open on the second nightstand. Her account was still logged in. I didn't plan to snoop. But then I saw the chat window. My heart started pounding. There was no innocent explanation for what I was looking at. And with every word I read, anger boiled inside me. The truth, undeniable and ugly, was staring me right in the face. I couldn't take it. The moment the words on that screen sank in, I slammed the laptop shut with enough force to rattle the nightstand. My breath was coming in sharp, shallow bursts, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I had to get out of there. I stormed out of the bedroom like a man on fire, heading straight to the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I grabbed a wine glass and filled it to the brim. With each sip, the harsh reality settled deeper into my bones. The illusion of my perfect family? Gone. Kate and Kevin. Of all people, Kevin. I had trusted them. I had let them into my home, my life. And now, it all made sense. The odd tension, the secrecy, the way Kevin had pretended to be concerned about Kate's behavior. It had been a test, hadn't it? To see if I knew. I knew now. My first instinct was to go find them and confront them on the spot. To demand answers, to make them pay. But that was too easy. I downed the rest of my drink and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. My fingers curled into a fist, and that's when I noticed a sharp sting. I looked down and saw a deep scratch along my forearm, probably from when I slammed the laptop shut. Blood was already dripping onto the floor. I turned on the bathroom faucet and let the cool water rinse over the wound. As the crimson swirled down the drain, so did the last bit of hesitation I had left. A plan was forming. I had always been a jealous man. And Kate? Well, she had just given me a reason to act on it. I composed myself, walking back into the kitchen where Kate was still busy, humming to herself as if nothing had changed. She looked up at me, smiling. "Hey, are you okay? You disappeared for a bit." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just needed a minute. Actually, I have to head into town in the morning. Kevin needs a ride." "Oh." She tilted her head slightly, still clueless. "Yeah. He said he had something to take care of," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'll pick him up on my way." We agreed on a time, and I let the conversation drift back into normal territory, letting her believe everything was fine. But it wasn't. That night, I made a few stops, my apartment, my office, and a couple of other places, before finally picking Kevin up in the morning just as planned. When we arrived back at the house, Kate was in the kitchen as usual, whipping up something special. She had no idea what was coming. Neither did Kevin. I stepped out into the hallway for just a few minutes. When I returned to the kitchen, I found them both sitting at the table, sipping their wine, whispering to each other. I took my time walking toward them, watching. Then, slowly, too slowly, their movements started to slow. Their whispers faded. Their hands, still gripping the delicate stems of their wine glasses, began to tremble. And then, nothing. Silence. Their heads slumped forward onto the table, eyes wide open but completely still. I exhaled, stepping closer. First I checked Kevin. Then Kate. Neither of them would be hurting me again.